2022 had a lot of new and very good albums that came out, but today I don't get to talk about those albums, but instead I get to talk about the less than stellar albums that came out this year. As I did say, I did like a lot of stuff that came out this year, but there were a handful of projects that I thought stunk, were really boring, or just full out disappointing. And if you like any of these albums that I mentioned, good for you. I'm not going to try and attack you for having these opinions because that would be stupid. And this isn't Twitter, so why not? Make sure to like, subscribe, turn on that bell for new uploads for me, and let's get started with this list. At number 15, we have Panic at the Disco with Viva Las Vengeance. I really wanted to make a full video on this album. I really did, but listening to it after, I really couldn't do it. Considering there is a lot of discourse around Panic at the Disco, and me being a fan as well, I can't really just stand this thing. The writing gives this thing such an unlikable energy to it, and the production is just really bad, and showing why analog tapes aren't really a good idea anymore. The guitar tones are pretty awful, the bass can be really clean and disgusting, and the drums can just sound stale and boring. And my god, Brendan's voice on some of these songs are just absolutely terrible. I hope this album is really just the final nail in the coffin for Panic. And I forgot about one thing. Considering my ranking video, consider this album to be number 7. This thing is pretty bad. At number 14, we have Disturbs with Divisive. I mean, what else can I say already? It's a new Disturbed album. This album is just really dull and filled with some of the most testosterone-fueled riffs that really amount to nothing without any substance. I don't know, I never really liked Disturbed, so I wasn't losing much with this experience. This band really doesn't give me a whole lot to talk about, and overall is just another bland and boring album by a bland and boring band. And at number 13, we have the self-titled album from Zeal Ardor. I really wanted to like this album. I'm so sorry. This was my first introduction to this group, and I guess I just wasn't hooked. I heard these guys had better music, but this to me felt like Imagine Dragons if they went in a more metal direction. I think for me, the production really does kill a lot of the album, since it makes things very loud and totally in your face. The thing is, it could have been good, but even I'm not a really big fan of the compositions itself. I might be wrong about this pick, who knows, maybe I'll check out some of their other works so I can maybe reevaluate this, but this just wasn't good, I'm just so sorry. And at the number 12 spot, we have Charlie Puth with Charlie. Charlie Puth is not a good artist. He clearly has the talent, but it seems like he just doesn't want to make good music. I listened to his first album and yeah, it was pretty shit. And while I heard decent things about his second album, his new album lost a lot of goodwill for his reputation in my eyes. This album really feels like it was made to pander to the TikTok crowd, which is, to me, an already shitty way of making music. I mean, the fact that this man is 30 years old, and yet he writes some of the most immature pop music I've heard all year, really is saying a lot. Like, I think he actually wrote a song about how all girls are the same. Like I said before, he's 30. He's just really trying to pander to stay relevant at this point. There's no other way I can put this. And at the number 11 spot, we have Jack Harlow's Come Home, the Kids Miss You. Bruh, I just really don't know what else to say other than just, bruh. This thing is just too dumb and boring at the same time. Like, the lyrics on this thing can be really bad, but everything else is too drab to match up with the crappy lyrics. Other than the singles, do you really remember this album? I mean, even I, who listened to this album before writing this video, doesn't even remember this album. Even after the mixed reception from literally everyone, I don't understand how Dua Lipa and Jack Harlow are dating. Like, I wish I was making that up. I guess that song worked. Starting off our top 10, we have Youngblood with Youngblood. Man, and I thought Charlie Puth was bad. Unlike Charlie Puth, who I had some goodwill towards, I never really had any of that with Youngblood. I always thought he was a tryhard in his two previous albums before this really are emblematic of that. It's really hard to take him seriously with some of his other contemporaries. There are some okay moments on here, but the album just has that energy of trying to be young and reckless, but it feels like my grandpa trying to be cool. Or even worse, it could have even been... I'm just gonna ignore that for now before I get myself all wound up. This album just sucks, and I hate the style of pop rock so much, I just want it to go away. And at number 9, we have Honestly Nevermind by Drake. And I totally forgot this thing even came out. It's Drake's totally awful attempt to make a dancehall record. He's been trying to make songs like these in the past, and yeah, they were pretty bad, so why not try a full album's worth of this? This thing is just painfully forgettable. I think I only remember this album existing is because of that weird beef Drake had with Anthony Fantano. I know the meme is like dead at this point, but Drake probably had smoke coming out of his ears with a completely red face when messaging Fantano that. I didn't get a chance to listen to that new Beyonce album when it came out. I've only heard the song Break My Soul, and yeah, that song is just so much better than literally anything off this new Drake album. I will say, Her Loss was actually a decent album. 21, could you do something for me? And at number 8, we have Avril Lavigne with Love Sucks. Honestly, just saying any year after 2016 or something, yeah, 2022 was not a good year for mainstream pop punk. I've never really personally cared for Avril Lavigne, although I do like some of her songs, and I actually really respect her in a lot of ways. However, I feel like something was just lost with so many people on this album. This album just feels juvenile, but not in a fun way like many other pop punk bands pulled off in the past. It really does feel like it's giving off how do you do fellow kids vibes. And I mean, there's a feature from Black Bear and a certain someone that I will mention way later in this video. The production really doesn't have that punch a lot of pop punk is known for. And sure, the songs are anthemic and all, but they still feel hollow and lack any real goal. Although I will say one thing, it did feel like a warning of what was yet to come later in the year. But first, we have to get through some other stuff before we can get to that. At number 7, we have Walker Hayes with Country Stuff, the album. I don't want to spend too much time on this album like all of the other albums I mentioned even later in the video, but this thing is just corny as shit. Some of the worst songs I've heard all year rear their ugly heads on this album. This thing is just so stupid that even things were sillier, it felt like it was missing something to make it feel fun. And the worst part about it is, it's not even the worst country album I've heard this year. And now at the number 6 spot, we have Skillet with Dominion. I mean, it's fucking Skillet. What else can I say? They've always sucked. They've been continuing their electronic direction along with their lyrical themes of compelling Christ, in that way you will rise like a phoenix from the ashes. They've been on their downward spiral since their album Rise, and it's pretty much just rock radio music in order to just be played on the radio stations. Considering that John Cooper is kind of a dumbass, it doesn't surprise me that this album sucks. I'm just really tired of rock music being dumbed down by legendary acts in order to get radio play, and this wasn't even the worst album to drop this year that fit that category. And finally, entering our top 5 albums of, stinkers this year, we have the Black Eyed Peas with Elevation. By the time I'm writing this video, this album is just so bad that it doesn't have a Wikipedia page, and that's just one of the funniest things ever. The Black Eyed Peas have had a somewhat okay album with Masters of the Sun, but they piss all that good interest out of the way with Translation filled with its reggaeton influences. Even though nobody liked that album, they somehow thought it would be a good idea to make another reggaeton album. This album is just straight up their worst since the beginning, which is definitely saying a lot. Say what you will about any of their albums by the Black Eyed Peas, at least they don't have lyrical inspirations from the Adam Levine DMs. How is this real? Honestly, after their Super Bowl performance, the Black Eyed Peas should have really just stayed dead. I don't know any other way how the P's will get the public's goodwill back. And at number 4, we have Gail, A Study of the Human Experience, Volume 1. I know this is an EP, but this is still my list, and it's still my rules. With that being said, this thing still sucks, although it could have been my other 3 entries. Bro really does think she's Olivia Rodrigo. I swear, this is one of the most immature and shallow things I've heard all year. And maybe I could be a bit harsh on this thing since she is somewhat young, but at the same time, she's older than me. So I think I can get this opportunity. I don't know if it's because of a label, but wow, this thing is just so shallow that a kiddie pool is deeper than this. Also, like, the 3rd track on this thing is one of the worst songs to come out this year, and my god, it's so bad. In an age where people like Olivia Rodrigo and Billie Eilish can turn their albums into commercial success about heartbreak, I don't know if this thing is genuine enough to be spoken in the same breath as those two, unless it's like a comparison. And at number 3, we have Cowboy Tears by Oliver Tree. Okay, but like, who the fuck actually thinks Oliver Tree is a good artist? Like, this album just proves he's one of the most unnecessary artists we've had in recent memory. His voice sucks, and his music is so bland. He's just so annoying on this thing. He's just like a troll who makes very bland music that's designed to be played on TikTok or literally any other social media platform. I know it's a persona and all, but there's so many artists and bands who have personas that make genuinely interesting music. Mr. Tree attempts to go country, but it's like he's never heard country as it's barely actually on the album. Please, I just want to be done with this video. What's number 2? Hopefully it isn't something that bad. And at the number 2 spot, we have Machine Gun Kelly with Mainstream Sellout. God damn it! I've hinted at this appearance a few times in this video, and if there was a scapegoat in 2022 where everyone just hated on one particular person, it would be Machine Gun Kelly. No matter what circle you were a part of, this man was always getting clowned on, and it was very well deserved. This album is the reason why pop punk this year was just so bad. We all know that thing where he got dissed out of rap and then he had to go back to rock, but he's getting now dissed out of rock and he's actually going back to rap. He tries to be self-aware and attempt to take the piss out of himself, but it just sounds like he's really butthurt. So many people have dragged this album through the mud already, and what else can I add? From the emo girl controversy, the production being stale as hell, the really awful lyrics, and just MGK's weird personality rearing its ugly face throughout the year. The general public has made it clear that no one really likes this man. It just goes to show that we needed a rock revival in the mainstream, but just not by someone who cries to himself that he's not emo. I swear to God, this man is 32 years old. What world are we living in? And the number 1 worst album of 2022, in my personal opinion, is Kid Rock with Bad Reputation. Well, I've pretty much angered all the rednecks out there, and it feels comical to really put this album on this list, especially at the number 1 entry. I mean, at first, you really think it's gonna be a fuck you to all those libtards with the first 2 tracks, and even has the snowflake advisory warning replacing the parental advisory sticker. It's funny bad for like the first 2 songs, but then it just becomes a really boring country album. Like, why is this thing 70 minutes long? And for an album that's supposed to feed off of how anti-authority it is, it sure is really edgeless. Kid Rock tries to convince the audience that he's still that southern middle to lower class citizen, when we all know he literally isn't. A common trend that I kept seeing on this list was that artists were trying to act much younger than they really were, and goddamn, this thing feels really apparent on that note. Kid Rock is like 50 years old, and he acts like a 16-year-old Twitter user who complains that things are getting too woke nowadays. Oh, woe is me! This album is just boring and bloated. Even though MGK was acting like a total weirdo this year, at least he tried to keep that energy in his music. Kid Rock didn't try. It made 70 minutes of the most boring country music I've heard all year, and that's why this album is my least favorite album of this year. Well, that was painful, but hey, that was my list of the worst albums that came out this year. Let me know what were your least favorite albums of 2022. Make sure to stay in tune because I will be making a best list very soon. This was a lot of work for me to do, and I'm going to go take a nap. Goodbye.
This is my song about football players. He wears pants and he sleeps with a nightlight, drives a car and he flushes the toilet. He's a football player. Hi-ya.